This is EntreEd Talk, the podcast for entrepreneurial educators by entrepreneurial educators. We are your hosts, Toi Hirschman and
Amber Ravenscroft. This podcast is created by the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education, or EntreEd for short.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the EntreEd Talk podcast. We are excited to have Patrick Kelly with us today. Patrick is a successful entrepreneur, speaker, and strategist. For more than 15 years, Patrick has been dedicated to growing supply chains for produce partners around the world, becoming the class of 2015's Young and Smart Leaders on the Rise, Top 40 Under 40, and a young entrepreneur making better deals for growers. He has dedicated his work to learning and leading all generations to work and thrive together. Patrick has consulted for dozens of companies, ranging from some of the world's Fortune 500 to small local businesses. Today, Patrick leads Millennial Boom, helping millennials and boomers thrive together in life and work. And he is a small business owner, keynote speaker, and executive in produce and supply chain industry. Welcome, Patrick. We're so excited to have you today.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh, this is so cool. This is going to be a great interview. I already know. So we like to kick things off with, the first question is, tell us a little bit about your story, your journey, and how you got to where you are today.
Sure. Fantastic. So it's funny, my entrepreneurial journey started at a very, very young age. My dad was an immigrant from Canada. His mom came down to California when my dad was a kid, and my dad got into produce and supply chain. So as a young kid, I remember living in different states, and also one of the states being Florida. I used to pick oranges actually in Florida during the summer for my dad's business. And, I kind of got that. And I mean, when I was 14, not like at the age of 60, this was like when I was 14, I was picking oranges with my brothers who were 15 and 17. So when that got done, I was still like, well, what's next? Well, what can I do next? As my brothers were going out spending their money, I was sitting here saving my money and going, okay, well, if I do this in the next month, I can have this much money before the end of the summer. And that just kind of grew on me. And then it went to things as using my brother's social security number to get a job. I pretended to be my brother, actually, until they found out. And, they had to call my mom, and they had to get permission from my mother for me to go to work. I was working at being a dishwasher under the name of Brian Kelly for about a month and a half as a 15-year-old.
You were running out of credit though, so.
So it was, but again, it was this passion that it wasn't just one thing. It was like, I want to get out there. I want to work. I want to meet people. So I did the dishwashing thing. And then all of a sudden it kind of came to me. My dad one day goes, get out and mow the lawn. It was like 6:30 a.m. in Florida. That's when you had to mow the lawn, between like 5 and 6:30 in Florida. And I was like, okay, all right. Yeah. How much am I getting for that? And he's like, nothing. And I'm like, $10. I'll do them both every week. And he's like, what? Okay, whatever. Right. So then I saw a guy mowing the grass 2 blocks down. And guess what? There was a real estate agent. Went to the real estate agent. And I said, hey, I'll mow this grass for you for $5. And I go, how many other houses do you have on the block? And that was like my first entrepreneurial journey. Like, I actually had a real estate agent in Mount Dora, Florida, who I was like 15, 16, and I would mow about 5 to 6 lawns per week. And I would go collect the money from the real estate agent. And I did this for this guy for like 2 summers. And then I started washing cars. And then, it just turned into something like I just never thought about, right? I've learned how to make money without even having a job, right? Without even having to go to work or use my brother's social security anymore. So that is how it started. And then that just turned into getting more experience within supply chain management, understanding the value within produce, how you can use your passion and experience through customer service. So I just ended up building a few companies. Then once I got into my 20s and had fun that way, right? So that's kind of how it started, though. Can I say washing cars, mowing lawns, and pretending I was somebody else to make money and have fun.
That's
incredible.
We have so many people that are on our podcast that started mowing lawns. Yeah, it's like a thing. We should, all kids should mow lawns, because that seems to be the entrepreneurial
But I will say this one's a little unique in that you found the partner like to provide you the supply for that. So I think that that's like an interesting kind of component. And you went very rapidly. So we went into a deep dive of like 15-year-old Patrick's entrepreneurial journey. Then you went, and then I launched a few companies. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your work specific to the produce supply chain and some of the accomplishments that you've done in that space.
Oh, perfect. So I was working for my father it was like off and on, because as my dad owned a business, it wasn't like we had a job with him. It was as he needed us, he would tell us, hey, I need you for this, or hey, file paperwork. You know what I mean? It wasn't like we were salary. It was like we would get checks from my dad or cash from my dad. And then it did transform once my dad did start a business, actually a bigger business, and we all became employees of the business. And, it just became, that's where the millennial boom happened. My dad and I just weren't getting along in the workplace. I mean, all the things that I talk about, work's not somewhere you go, it's something you do. It was, no, you got to be here at 7, you got to be the first one in, last one out. And I started gaining customers and vendors in different ways, right? I was gaining market shares in ways that were untraditional to what he was used to. And so I ended up leaving my dad's company, and that's when I started my own company. That was in 2008, 2009. And I had a couple partners at the time. And over between probably 2008 and 2010, I started 2 companies with 2 different partners that I was able to start and then pretty much have someone buy it out, liquidate the company, and then go work for them, and then do the same thing with them. And then instead of me doing that for another person, I then started my own organization in 2010 that I was like, okay, I'm going to focus on quality and integrity that people can trust. I don't understand why these boomers are out doing these back alley agreements and saying that this is how business is to be done when I'm dealing with a lot of other people and they're not doing business this way. So like I said, that's when that boom happened, and I started doing more research on what companies are doing with their workforce, with what generations were leading the companies, what was driving each generation. Was it money? Was it materials? All of that. And through 2010 to 2015, I ran a company with my brother, Chris, who is my COO. I had another few people that worked for me, one in Costa Rica, one in Massachusetts, and we promoted fresh premium produce with quality and integrity that you can trust. And then in 2015, I ended up then going to work for a Fortune 200 company, which I liquidated my shares within the organization just because we were looking at different ways to grow and move. And this was one of our main competitors at the time. So it was funny. I ended up going to work for one of our lead competitors. We ended up closing that business down. And then my brother branched out, started his own business. And during that time, we started 2 trademark brands. One we started was Sweet Goldies. Started an LLC off that brand. And then we started Sweet Goldies Enterprise, which is a Costa Rican export company, which exports mangoes, pineapples, and other tropical fruit from Costa Rica. And then during that time of 2010 to 2015, we started Decision Logistics, which was another LLC that managed all the freight between the other companies that we were dealing with, and then found new freight partners that would move like medical equipment to doctors' offices across the US, or we would help transport cars. When you see the cars on the 18-wheelers going across the US, we would contract those trucks and broker those trucks to move certain products. Again, though, once I went to work for the Fortune 200 company, they were like, whoa, you cannot own these companies and come work with us. So again, I liquidated my shares to my brothers and my family. And so during that time, if you look at it, we started about 5 companies during 2010 and 2015 within produce and supply chain, which is why, as you see, I was named top 40 under 40 as a young entrepreneur making better deals for growers. We were increasing grower returns. Growers have a very hard issue. It's hard to be a grower with money, processes, supply chain. So there were things that we always knew that if we cut our margins in a certain way and gave back to the grower, we knew we'd be a leader in that way, right? So then I started getting, again, we were starting to sell fresh packed stone fruit to processors that was really not done before. So we started looking at ways that other people were like, nah, we don't venture in that sort of business. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what I can do in this. So I would literally go to packing houses and go grab coals, like rotten fruit. And I'd be like, give me all your rotten fruit. I'm going to take it to a warehouse. I'm going to have them sort through it, and I'm going to clean it up. And then we're going to send it to a juice processor because there's still a lot of good fruit in here. And they were like, yeah, that's a waste of time. And I was like, yeah, but I don't need to make the money that you're making. I just need to make a fraction of the money, and then I'm going to give that grower back some money. Hopefully then he will sell me other products. And that's exactly what happened. So we were able to get other products by doing a lot of the dirty work. People were like, wow, you actually are making money off that? I'm like, yeah, we actually are. And now we created that, right? So we created a little bit of competition because we were starting to put out prices in the newspapers of what we were giving to growers. And then growers were calling us like, we didn't get that price. And we're like, well, come talk to us then. So that's how it kind of just started. And that's how I kind of became the young entrepreneur making better deals for growers. And kind of was in the Produce Business Journal and a few other publications, and really just focusing on my passion, which was at the time, which was quality and integrity.
It's incredible. It's so funny how you just very casually mentioned, oh, I just came up with this new innovative way to do things. And then I did it again. And then I did it again. But it's a pretty big deal. I mean, that's incredible that you took an industry that was pretty well defined, I would think, and saw these really cool ways to, find the pain points really in the industry and solve those things. And then it becomes, and becomes super successful doing that. That's incredible. Just out of curiosity, I know you talked about, you had like that aha moment when you were mowing lawns, but we ask some of our guests this sometimes. Did you ever have a teacher or an educator that ever talked about entrepreneurship or the mindset of an entrepreneur throughout your academic career?
So, through my academic career, yeah, of course. I mean, I always say a lot of my teachers always told me, I have two. Okay. So one of my teachers, Eric Naselrode, from Fresno City College and Fresno State University. I mean, really, he was like, Patrick, you've got this business. And this is exactly how Eric talks too. He's like, Patrick, you got this business and you got the passion, and it doesn't matter what you do, you're going to make money. And I'm like, I was in college at the time, had a kid at the time. I wasn't a traditional college kid. I went to like 13 years of college. And I'm sitting there just like listening to him every time. And I'm just like, you know what? He's right. Passion, got a little bit of experience. I add value. And I'm like, you're right. I'm like, okay. So he was always the one that I still look to him now. We still talk often, as I tell him all the time. He's like, you still doing the same thing? I'm like, yep. I'm still promoting my passion. Right. It's like, and that's what he would always say to me. It wasn't about entrepreneurship. It was about, and I think that is about entrepreneurship, but it was never about that definition of, oh, this is what you need to do. Here's the feasibility. Here's this. He was like, Patrick, no, you got the passion. You got the experience. You add value. Boom. And I was just like, yeah, he's right. I'm just going to keep focusing and keep building that. The other one was my biggest aha moment when I kind of knew it was I was 16 and I was actually working at Walgreens at the time. And I do have a little 3-minute episode that will be coming out on my podcast called Ducks in Society. And the gentleman's name was Richard Gonsalves. We called him Mr. G because everybody always pronounced his name wrong. And he came up to me one day and he goes, Patrick. I said, yes. He's like, you want to be another duck? And I'm sitting here going, what? And I was like 16 at the time. I'm like stalking like the gummy bears like that on the shelf. So I'm like looking at him like, dude, listen, is it 10 o'clock yet? I got to get out of here. Like, you know what I mean? And he goes, no, I'm serious. This is a serious question I have for you. And I said, what's a duck? And he goes, a duck is a guy that shows up to work, does his job, collects his paycheck every week, and doesn't really care about anything else that happens. And I was like, what? And I said, no, I don't want to do that. And that's when it hit me. He started mentoring me more. He's like, well, I'm going to teach you how to not be a duck. He taught me how to stock shelves more efficiently. He taught me how to work inventory control, taught me how to count the drawers faster, taught me how to be more efficient. And to this day, I still talk about him to everyone. He was actually a groomsman in my wedding as well, back in 2008. And it's funny because, I mean, that's when I knew. I was like, I never want to be a duck in society. I never want to be that. So those two people were very huge motivators in my entrepreneurship and academic journey.
Wow. I don't want to be a duck either.
I love that. I've never heard of that.
You either. That's awesome.
Well, I want to talk about, so I know that Toi's probably like waiting for me to dive into this subject area, just so you can feel it coming. So the idea of generational leadership, I know you do a lot in that space. And you actually kind of brought up an interesting point when you were talking about how what your dad did wasn't what you wanted to do. And there's a lot of research that shows that's when the generations flip, is like how they approach new things. So I was wondering if you could speak a little towards that and then dive into your message around millennial boom and, you know, how that's so unique to entrepreneurship and education.
I'll start off with why is it so unique to entrepreneurship and education. Education is about teaching certain philosophies, certain, I would say, mannerisms towards a specific content, right? Because there's content that's put out and it needs to be taught, right, in a certain way for certain credit hours. And the goal is of each professor, and trust me, I've been in that world, is that you have to deliver the message the best possible way for every student to acquire that knowledge. But every student is going to be different within entrepreneurship. So why is that unique? Because I've been to a lot of different colleges. I've spoken at a lot of different colleges, and a lot of the educators are still teaching old philosophies. They're still teaching old ways of how to promote your business through marketing. And it's like when you read a marketing book, and trust me, I still have my books from college. I look at them and it's like, this has no relevance of what's happening today. Why do I need to know the definition of what this is when, unfortunately, I can go on YouTube and watch some of this stuff being performed by, you know, big thought leaders and watch and get visual learning aspects of it. So I always say the millennial boom, very huge within education, because as a professor in entrepreneurship, you have to be looking for the next big thing yourself to be able to teach the upcoming generation, because they are already looking at the new things before you. They're on TikTok before you're on TikTok. And I hate that older people always say, oh, well, that's what the kids are doing. And it's funny because the kids is who every company is advertising to, the next generation, to be the purchasers once the money transfers. They're not advertising to you anymore. They're advertising to generations below you. Mm-hmm. So I would say to entrepreneurship, they have to always be continuously looking at it. And if they're stuck in their ways of how they've created success, they're going to fail over time, because they have to create new ways of success to show their students that they're still in the world of entrepreneurship.
I think that is super important. We have some amazing educators that we've interviewed that do think that way. And it's so nice because, as you said, that's not the norm. And it's just really cool to hear somebody that's actually experienced it and been through it. And you can say that that's what educators should be thinking about, because it's not, you're right. It's not stale anymore. It's constantly moving. It's dynamic, and it is a big shift. And, you know, technology has a lot to do with it. And I wonder if you could actually speak to that a little bit about the technology and kind of the differences, since you did have a little bit of a marketing background, what some of those differences are for you. And, you know, like you mentioned YouTube and learning things, and it kind of made me smile because my son is very, very unhappy in school. And he says, I can learn everything on YouTube. I don't need to go to school. But
oh gosh, it's so true. Yeah, and it is so true. There's a great gulf in technology between, I would say, boomers, Xers, and millennials. So we talk more about the two biggies in our book and in my podcast. That's what we talk about. But there's natives versus settlers. And it's funny because Hans will always say, he's like, I'm an early adopter, right? And he'll tell you about his journey, you know, starting with, you know, this trash 80 computer that he used to have right back in the, I think what was that? I don't even remember. Was it like the 80s? It could have been the 80s. Like he had his first computer. And so he's a settler to technology, as he says, because he's like, I didn't grow up with technology. I had to ask my boss for, you know, computers. I had to ask, you know, it wasn't like you go to work and you get fed a laptop like it is today. Like right when you get to a job today, like the first thing they do is like, we're going to get you your laptop and your cell phone. Like those are the first two most important things when you're going into a marketing job, a sales job, even being an entrepreneur. Those are your two tools in your tool belt that you 100% need. So natives versus settlers, even myself, Hans calls me a native to technology. I don't think the millennials, the Xers, or the baby boomers are actually settlers at all. I mean, we're all settlers, not natives, because what's happening is I didn't get my first pager or phone until I was 16 or 17 years old. And the phones that I had were those old Nokia phones. You remember? Or the old block phones. It was like a Nextel. It was like a big block Nextel. But we didn't have the technology that we did today. So what's happening today, like you're saying with your child, is we didn't have that. So they're so ingrained, they are natives to this world. Like they are looking at us going, what do you mean? Why are you still looking up search engines on Google? My kid looks at me every time I get on Google. He's like, Dad, YouTube, you're doing it wrong. And I'm like, that's right, my bad. I'm like, got to go on YouTube. And I'm like, but it's those things that they've learned that just like we did. When our generation grew up, we learned that Google was the best search engine to find out anything. And we learned it that way. Now, my kid will tell me, why do I want to read an article when I can listen to that same article on YouTube being read to me by somebody else? And I'm sitting there going, well, okay, wow, wait a minute. You can't down the next generation for the way that they learn. They're learning not by us, maybe we're a visual learner, right? We need to read it. We need to see it written on the board, right? We need to write it again in our notebook. For these natives in technology, they're coming up. They can watch it, listen, and absorb it that way, because that's what they've been so used to growing up. As us, as adults, right? As parents, we did give them our phones. We did put them in front of TVs. We did do those things because that's what some of the things we did, right? So there's going to be a huge shift even between the millennials and the iGens, right? Of how they use technology and work, how they utilize social media for marketing. I mean, I know most millennials that are 25, and there's 20 to 25 year olds that are millennials. They're so different from me. Like their marketing compared to my marketing are way different. How they use chat bots, how they go and use marketing within Facebook and LinkedIn. And I'm sitting there going, I've never paid either of those companies to do marketing. But you know what I mean? It's like, and then I'm listening to them and they're like, yeah. And then they're charging $2,500 down, what is it? Down payments and $500 a month to manage your social media. And I'm sitting here going, what? What? But they're still teaching me things that I don't traditionally do in business, which apparently is making them money. So there's a huge gap there. And I still don't know it, and I'm learning constantly on it.
Hi all, we are super excited to offer an exclusive discount for our listeners to attend this year's EntreEd Forum taking place on November 18th and 19th in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We have an incredible lineup of speakers and experiential learning opportunities to help you ignite entrepreneurial thinking and integrate entrepreneurship into your learning communities. Use promo code EntreEd Talk to receive 5% off of every individual registration. Again, that's promo code EntreEd Talk. To learn more about the forum and register, visit www.entre-ed.org today and subscribe for updates as we launch new things happening every week as part of the planning for the forum. Thanks. See you there. I think it's interesting too how you kind of brought that perspective of like how technology is impacting how students learn. And Toi, how your son is approaching YouTube as a learning tool is a perfect example. I love TikTok. I love that you brought up TikTok because there's also a trend going around right now. And I think that this is interesting for the educators that are listening to be aware of this. It really stresses the idea that we have to teach students differently now. There's a trend on TikTok where high school students will ask their teacher and they'll say, what are 3 things you use every day? And the teacher will say like my cell phone, like soap, like these really obscure things. And the student will be like, I noticed you didn't say molecular biology. And the point of that is that the education as a whole is not keeping up with this demand from students to make it relevant because you are every day using math and biology. They're just not connecting it. And I think that's why I thought you would love that trend because that's exactly what we talk about. And I love watching the teachers get caught in it on TikTok. So yeah.
That's hilarious.
It's great.
Well, And it creates exposure for, again, what are we selling to? My goal is not to sell to baby boomers. Like, I'm 34 years old. My goal is not to go market to baby boomers or Xers. Like, I'm sorry, that time is done. Yes, they hold a lot of the buying power, but my goal is to create awareness for the next 10 years. Like, my goal now in Tampa, I'm sitting in Tampa, Florida, and the Super Bowl will be here next year. Like, my goal is there is going to be how many people here for the Super Bowl. All right, what can I do to create awareness around what I do? You know what I mean? It's like, there's going to be so many kids going out to party. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm sitting here, and trust me, I see it down here all the time. This is a Clearwater and all that. It's like, how many kids are out partying? Like, I was driving down in, it's called Hyde Park, the other night, and Aaron Judge was down there at the bar buying drinks for everybody. Like, he's the New York Yankees guy, right? And I'm sitting there going, yeah, look, I go, I wouldn't do that. But you know what I mean? But that's who's spending their money. That's who's going out. That's who's, they've got residual income apparently to spend.
Mm-hmm. People would be remiss to not focus on, one, how are we educating those younger generations, and and then two, how are we marketing to them? I was wondering if you could reflect, something we talk about at EntreEd a lot is the idea that the emerging generations are also just more entrepreneurial themselves in nature. Like, they are viewing college as kind of an option, not necessarily a requirement. Like, when I was in school, I was told I was going to college. So I was wondering if you could maybe reflect on why you think that's happening as they are graduating.
Well, they're seeing the value. There's no value in college anymore to companies. Look, Apple, Tesla, Google, they'll hire you right out of high school because they're more looking for that, one, the passion, and then they know they can mold you in a certain way. I went to college for about 13 years because my dad didn't promote college. He promoted entrepreneurship. He promoted getting out and hard work, put food on the table, right? Because that's kind of how the baby boomers thought. I think that the iGens are seeing what the millennials have been doing, which is kind of their next generation to look up to, and or hate, right? It's always the hate. You always hate the generation in front of you, right? And then you always hate the one behind you. But I think they're looking up going, wait a minute, look what the millennials have done, because I think that millennials did start a trend. A lot of them did go to college. A lot of them didn't. I think I don't know the exact, I got to look up the number, but I think it's up in the air of millennials going to college. Millennials are still very entrepreneurial, doing their own thing. I think the iGens are seeing that they can make more money when why would you want to go to work as a director making $85,000 to $100,000 a year when you have to work 60 hours a week, report to somebody, have them tell you when to take vacation, or you can probably work, I don't know, Uber 4 nights a week, create content online following education or your passion on maybe, like I said, even building Legos. Heck, they have a contest on shows now, building Legos. So if you could put your passion there and you could find ways to make money, why would you want to go work for somebody? And why would you want to get a degree in one aspect or one field? You know, many times I've heard people say to me, man, you're very, very educated and experienced, but only in produce and supply chain. And I'm like, what? I was like, you've lost your mind. Like, because you know what I mean? But people once they see that degree, once they see that education, that certificate, they're like, nope, okay, boom, yep, okay. He's going to focus on that. He's got a master's in strategy. That means I'm going to bring him in. He's only going to focus on that. And I think iGens are looking at that going, I want to focus on a lot of different things.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think I'm going to ask you this, but I think I know the answer because you talked about, if as educators and even as people who would be, hiring young people, they need to think outside of that box, but we all kind of put ourselves in that box in some ways, and think, okay, that there's more to this person. There's more that they can do. There's more that they're passionate about. And I think that, a lot of educators, that's really what we preach to them sometimes is get out of your own way and let the students teach you some things also and teach you how they learn. So we have a lot of educators that are interested in entrepreneurship that listen to this podcast. So do you have a bit of advice maybe that you could give them if, they want to tap into those iGens and really motivate them and get them to be entrepreneurially minded?
Yeah. You know what? And the first thing I would say, and I used to talk to Andy about this all the time, I would say, stop thinking the old ways are the right ways. Just because you made $1 million doesn't mean that someone else is going to make $1 million doing it your way. So what I always would tell all entrepreneurship educators that you need to be a leader in your own space, right? But you can't focus on your experience and what you've done that's going to make someone money. So if you look up something like TikTok, I'm not telling you to go get on TikTok and download and start doing videos every week. But what I am saying, it might be a good idea for you to download TikTok so you can watch the content and what's following on there. Watch what's happening in your own space. So when you can relate that back to your students, your entrepreneurship, and when you're in a presentation and you can immediately pull up a TikTok video that you downloaded and go, guys, how many of you have seen this? And it's got exactly what the students were talking about in last week. You're going to bring up more conversation. You're going to bring up, oh, Mr. Kelly was savage. You see that? You see that? What he brought? And then the students start to approach you differently and being like, how'd you find that? What'd you do? They're like, and then like I said, you can be like, well, that's what I do. You know what I mean? Like, got to keep up with you guys. Like, and then you're building relationships and they're building that sense of trust. Like, man, he's not just looking out for what he's doing. He's looking at what we're doing as well.
That's amazing. That's wonderful advice.
I also love what you pointed out, that like what might have worked effectively for you is not something that should always be taught. I feel like even sometimes we do a lot in career and technical education, and a lot of those instructors are, past welders and past more traditional, and they come in with those traditional skill sets, but they haven't caught up with the advancements of technology in that space. And so they get resistant to new instructional methods. And I think that's so interesting that you reflected on that, even from an entrepreneurship lens, is that it's not just entrepreneurial teachers, it's teachers of any academic subject area where they consider themselves to be highly skilled and highly expertised. That could have changed in the last 2 years. I mean, the way technology is evolving. So making sure that you're up to date and being willing to try new things is so vital. I really love that you uplifted that idea.
I mean, listen, I would say that's the goal. I mean, I got to constantly change. My wife tells me all the time, she's like, Patrick, if you're going to be the leader of this movement, she's like, you better be doing your research and making sure you know what's going on. It's like, I know who Charli D'Amelio was before she was on the Super Bowl commercials. And people
it's crazy. It's hard for me, even as I'm 26, right? So like, I still can't relate to that, but I understand who that is. And I think that's what you're saying. Like, it's important to know what is happening.
Exactly. Like I do another podcast called The Future Is Now. It's a live cast on Facebook. And they were like, oh, let's talk about trends. And 3 of the guys on there talked about the broom standing up. And you should see my face because we record everything. And I'm sitting there like, got my eyes up, kind of shaking my head. And they're like, Pat, what's up? And I was like, so what apps are you guys on? And they're like, and I'm like, I haven't seen one broom thing on TikTok. And they're like, oh, no one's on TikTok. That's what the kids use. And I was like, stop, done. I was like, now, and I'm like, now I'm jumping in. Okay. So, it's true. Different regions are using different things. I found that San Diego uses more Snapchat for text messaging. Why? Because you can't trace the text message, so your parents can't find out, right? It's like I learned what different everyone's doing in different areas, in different places, and I think that's why I can still stay connected to a 12-year-old, right? My niece, I can talk to her, right? Like I can be like, hey, what's up? I was like, you know who told on you, right? And she's like, you? I'm like, you know how you know? And she's like, because when you take a picture of someone else's picture on Snapchat, it tells that person. Mm-hmm. So it's like, you know what I mean? So it's not like the older generation going, I know, I have my ways. No, it's me like, hey, listen, come on. You need to be smarter than that. I found you on Snapchat. You know it was me. And then they look at you differently. The younger generations are like, okay, this guy's not out to get me. He's not trying to look over my shoulder. He's literally, he wants what's best for me. Right. And that's what we need to keep continuing with the next generations, is what's best for them.
I think it's so interesting you brought up, Toi, do you know what have you seen the broom standing trend? Okay, so like the brooms with dustpan.
Horrible.
Yeah, so basically those brooms can freestand on their bristles.
Right.
And so this whole trend is just people standing their brooms up everywhere. But if you were an educator, imagine the implications. Oh, hey, we can see you now.
I just noticed my
Welcome
video.
to technology, Patrick.
I was like, because I have you in a little square because I have other stuff up on my computer, and I was like, what? My video's
It's
off.
all good. It's all good. We're figuring it out. But the broom standing, no, I think this is fascinating because like if you were a high school physics teacher, imagine the lessons that could be taught around the broom standing phenomenon. Like that's how educators should be thinking. Like
that's what I'm saying. Yes.
And then make a lesson around it. Like
it's like my wife says. She's like, my wife every year for St. Patrick's Day, and I don't know how she does it every year, but she does. She dyes her feet green, and she plays a trick on her students that the leprechaun, and she does it like if they're bad, then the leprechaun dyes Mrs. Kelly's feet green, and she plays this whole like trick on her students. But now, I guess what she told me, she's like, oh, there's a new trend happening. She's like, I got something different this year. And I'm sitting there like, that's like, we're doing it for the kids, right? We're doing it for first, second, and third graders. And that's what needs to be happening inside of our colleges as well. We need to be thinking that same exact way. We don't need educators coming in suits anymore. We don't. I hate to say it. We need them doing stuff like that to say, look at what we did in a marketing aspect, right? And then if all those students were to do a TikTok that they painted, Mrs. Kelly's feet turned green because a leprechaun came and they were bad students. Oh my gosh. And then what you do is you show the social impact through that. Like, let's see what we did through that. We did a teamwork. We worked on a video. You know what I mean? There's more aspects to that. So
that's going to be, maybe Toi, that'll be our next compelling thing. Like take a TikTok trend and rethink it. And how can you teach it? You know, what's interesting. You could teach computer science with a big thing on TikTok is the dance routines. Like you could teach computer science, algorithmic thinking through how they like the renegade dance. Like you could do so many things. So yeah, I mean, that's going to be my takeaway. If you're listening, send us a TikTok lesson.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you look at some of my TikToks too, it's all focused on the millennial boom. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because even though someone will do, a weird sound or something, I'm like, wait a minute, I can do this where I can point here, do this, and I can and then all of a sudden it's like, have you heard the millennial boom? It's like, nope. And it's like, what's it about? Yep. And you can.
Yep, I know exactly.
So you can mix things around. And to me, people are like, why do you waste your time on that? And I go, wait a minute, that's free marketing. Yep. I just made a video in 15 seconds that actually I can put on my YouTube channel. Or if someone goes, hey, what's the millennial boom about? I'm like, dude, you got to check out this video I made. Yeah. And they're like, and trust me, I get a lot of response. They're like, yeah, that's cool.
If you haven't heard of TikTok, I sent something after our interview with Ted Dintersmith, Toi. I sent, because Ted talks a lot about standardized tests and like, why are we doing tests on traditional platforms and like multiple choice and just the stagnation of those? There are TikTok trends that teach you how to hack using code online testing platforms. So like I sent him one, I said, this is why we shouldn't be testing traditionally, because you can get on TikTok and search a quiz that you're taking. It'll teach you how to find because the right answer is built into the code on the back end. And so students, because they're so technology savvy, can look at the back end answers, like in TikTok's giving them the platform to learn how to do that. So they're just tricking the system. So we got to rewrite the system.
Exactly. They're going to, it's just like breaking in before. Remember back in the days, remember the old movies, they would break into school, the SAT papers. Like,
yeah.
That doesn't work anymore. That's like I was telling my dad about doctors on a plane. I go, there's no one going to stand up and say, is there a doctor on the plane? No, that was only in the movies. Like, there's not a doctor just sitting there going, I'm a doctor.
Yes, I know. It's fascinating. Toi, is there anything else that we want to follow up with before we wrap up?
No, I think we can wrap up, but I just want to thank Patrick for being here. This has been fascinating. I knew it would be. Your background is so incredibly diverse and awesome. So I'm just appreciative that you're here and look forward to talking further.
Awesome. Great. Awesome. Well, I appreciate all of you having me. It's been fun. I love talking about the generations and how we can build through entrepreneurship, education, and experience.
How can people connect with you? just on Twitter, your website, how can people learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, so I have a few different ways. I'm on all social media platforms. If you want to listen to my podcast, you can find me on SoundCloud and iTunes, Millennial Boom. If you want to visit my website, it's thepatrickkelly.com. If you're looking for a book, you could go to Order Now and you get a freshly signed book from myself. And I also write a couple notes in there about leadership when you order a book. And we also have millennialboomnow.com, Facebook, Millennial Boom Now, Twitter, Patrick Kelly 85, Instagram, the Patrick Kelly 85, and then YouTube, Millennial Boom Now.
We can tell what generation you're coming from. It's interesting. Our previous, if we have somebody from different generations, it's like, you can email me.
Listen, I don't want you to email me. You could go on, if you go on I always tell everybody, I said, there's no point of having a business card anymore. And they said, why? I said, because everybody always, the first thing they do when they get a business card is they go to your website or your LinkedIn page. So the best thing I can do is give them my website and say, if you send a message through my website, it goes directly to my phone. And if you do it in the next 5 minutes, I'll actually show you and prove it to you.
Yeah.
And then they're like, oh, okay. So it's easier that way. And then that filters one, as I say, that filters possibly a new customer to buy something on my shopping cart page.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. We're so appreciative, and we're just excited about everything you presented today. I think it has a lot of implications for our listeners. So thank you.
All right. Thank you.